Go.
Thank you for tuning in. This presentation is really a reminder for all of us about some of the assessment rules for BTEC courses. It doesn't just apply to applied science, and we're looking at the NQF, which covers level 2, and then RQF, level 1 and 3. My name is Mark Ashby. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm currently the lead internal verifier for applied science for Capital City College. But also there's another reason. I've been an SV for employed by Pearson for at least the last 15, maybe 16 years, maybe 17 years. So I've got a lot of experience in the rules, and I kind of have some inside information, which we don't always get internally. So I'm covering level 1, level 2 and level 3, and virtually all these rules are common to all three. There's a couple of little bits for level 2 which I'll highlight as we go through. So you may ask the question, why do we have these assessment rules we have to follow? Why do students have to hand the work in on time? Well over 10 years ago, employers and universities were questioning the solidity, the robustness of the course compared to A-levels. They're supposed to be at the same sort of academic standard, but it's clear that they were seeing students and employees who really weren't at the level suggested by their course. And this is down to a number of things. Coaching, telling students what to write. Again, we had a lecturer come here from a school where this was endorsed by the school. Excessive guidance. Assignments actually meant to be given out once teaching's done, and then it's almost like an open book test, if you like. Unregulated resubmission of work. I'm aware of this happening when I first started here 20 years ago. Not dealing with plagiarism and other types of malpractice. So all of these have led to these new qualifications, which have stringent assessment rules and exams, so that people can then look at the qualification with more confidence when they're trying to employ somebody or recruit a student. So we can look at assignment briefs, assessment learner work, and something called internal verification. Right, ideally, you are able to get this on an online edX online account, which will allow you to download material. If you haven't got an account, check the line manager how to do it. I'm completely unsure at the moment. So, there are some documents you should read, which are on the S drive. So the BTECAssessmentrules2025 Guide to Internal Assessment and the BTECAssessmentrules2025 Guide to Internal Verification. Everybody should have a copy of this and should read it. By the way, they're also available from Pearson. You can search for it and download it. Optional, if you're going to write your own assignments, there's a centre guide for writing assignment briefs. Or if you're going to modify the authorised ones significantly. Also, just for lead internal verifier and the curriculum managers, centre guide to standards verification. So they're available in the S drive. You can download them. Currently, we have the 2024 to 25 versions. I will upload and replace the 25 to 26 versions when available, but often they don't change very much. Right, assignment briefs. So, authorised assignment briefs are available. They do get updated every so often, so you should check on edX online for the latest version. You don't have to use the authorised assignment brief, but if you do write an assignment, please write it very carefully. Read that centre guide for writing, but also make sure the IV checks it thoroughly and referring to the specification. Maybe talk to myself, the LIV, or your curriculum manager as well before you decide to go and write it and why. And there may be good reasons for writing your own assignment. You can modify the assignment brief to make it more accessible to learners, and it's really good and encouraged to give the vocational scenario local setting. For example, if it's a genetics, you might want to do the setting at the Crick Centre and near King's Cross, for example, so that students can identify with it. Features assignment briefs, just go through quickly. You can see them on assignment briefs. It has to have the name of the assessors. You can do an assignment brief for a number of classes and put all the assessors for different classes if you want to. Handout and due dates, very important. The specific qualifications that learners are registered for. Say for example, you're teaching both a biomedical science and applied science group, but you could put both courses on that. But what shouldn't appear is courses that our students aren't registered for, any students here taking this unit. Works organising tasks, which you will see, and each learning aim is covered by one task. So you'll see this on authorised assignment groups. Please do not add criteria within the task. This was a deliberate act by Pearson to make sure learners don't just target the past work, but they will work through the whole assignment and, in their eyes, attain higher grades than maybe just making do with a merit or pass. There will be a section listing the evidence required. For example, is it a booklet? Is it a video? Again, you'll see this on your authorised assignments. And that's something you may want to change. You know, you may want slightly different evidence than what's authorised assignments. Criteria is listed top down, and that's deliberate. Again, really to try and encourage students to work at everything. And then for BTEC firsts, the fallback criteria are listed separately. But these are important, and I'll come back to those later on. Internal verification of assignment briefs is very important. Often it's not too onerous, particularly if you're using the authorised assignments, but they must be checked before given to learners. They must be internally verified. Even if the authorised assignment brief is used unchanged every year. So the assessor should download the internal verification sheet from the S Drive, fill it in with your name and the course, and send it to the internal verifier. The working timing is for a week to internally verify the assignment briefs. But you know, it'd be good to get these out. It'd be all out and done at the beginning of the year, and those dates have been verified and then added to this assessment planner. If you do make changes, let the ID know so they can then look at it more carefully. Don't expect them to find it. Don't, make life easier for them. So the internal verifier will check the tasks will allow the learners to achieve all the criteria with reference to the specification. Also, the hand-out and hand-in dates are suitable. The qualifications and correct assessors are listed. So they're just checking all that information. What do you do with the internal verification? Well, on the Angel Sciences, we have the S Drive. Within the science department, there's a BTEC assessment folder. There is now a 25 to 26 folder, so just find the right folder. And if you're not sure, ask myself, one of the other assessors, or one of the curriculum managers, where to find things and then where to post things. And by the way, once you've internally verified an assignment, you or the assessor should put the date it was done on the assessment plan, so it's all recorded. I will be checking that, by the way. Every so often checking the assessment plan is up to date. Once you've finished all the works required to complete the assignment, then you're ready to hand out the assignment. Okay, this is very important. The student, you finish teaching the whole learning aim, and then you give out the assignment. You could consider, and this is recommended by Pearson, and I find it quite useful for some assignments, is to have a draft homework assignment where you can outline the work they need to do. So this is where you can give full feedback and say, oh, you didn't get M1 on this homework, or you wouldn't have done, but you know what, if you do this, then you'll be on track. You can give the sort of feedback you're not allowed to give on the actual assignment. Obviously, you've got to give the marking out before you then give out the actual brief. Once the assignment's handed out, there's very limited feedback that you can give. That's why this is so useful, okay? Your learners are supposed to work independently. Now please note, and this has come up a few times, so applied science, quite a few assignments require practical activities. If a learner's missed an activity which they're required to complete the assignment, you cannot issue the assignment. Think of it this way. If they've missed a practical, they need to pass that assignment, you're given an assignment that they cannot pass. So you need to log this somewhere, and then you give them the assignment brief with a personalised due date. That then allows you, once you've marked the work, if they meet the conditions, to give them a resubmission. Don't give them a resubmission once they've done the practical. Right, assignment dates. Our working rule is often 2 weeks, but it's not, it can be changed from handout submission. If I've given for example, if I've given a homework activity where it's really covered the whole assignment and they're really prepared, I might give them less than 2 weeks because they've already done work for it. And I'll tell the students with the homework, consider you're working on the assignment before you're giving it. So you could take that into account. You could give longer than 2 weeks. Now, remember this, if learners submit all the work, you mark all the work. BTEC does not allow capping, so you don't just give them pass, which maybe on other courses you might do. But they're not allowed a resubmission. Level 1 and 3 learners are also then precluded from submitting a retake if the resubmission is late, or the first submission is late. Learner requiring extensions should submit an extension form before the due date and negotiate the new due date with the tutor and assessor. So this can be negotiated. For example, don't just give, if they have a 25% educational reason, then okay, give them 25% of the, just count the working days of the week, not the weekend. But on the other hand, if they've had flu, talk to them. They might just need 3 days or 2 days, but actually they might need another week because if they've not been able to work for a whole week, they might need longer than maybe 3 days. So again, it's negotiated, but remember it's a double-edged sword for the learner. If they agree to that 5 days, then you stick to they should stick to those 5 days. So make sure they're happy with their extension date. Marking learner work. Now the BTEC and college guide for marking is 2 weeks where possible. Now I say that because a lot of us are now teaching the same unit to 4, 3, 5, or in some cases 7 groups. That means you're getting 7 sets of assignments. So it's really quite difficult, but this is the idea we should be working to. When you're giving feedback, do write comments on the actual work. Don't spend too long in it, though. You know, maybe highlight good work, some spelling, punctuation, grammar errors, not too many. But the most important part is the assessment record sheet, which should be submitted with the work. Make sure it's clear to learners why they did or did not achieve the criteria. However, particularly if you're going to have a resubmission, you cannot tell them what they have to do to achieve the criteria. Again, this is guidance I've got from the Senior Standards Verifier. Do tell them why they did not achieve the criteria. And that's particularly worth putting on the general comments, because obviously they can then use that if they're working on a resubmission. If they know what they got wrong, they know what to do right. So here's some example. Here's what you should be checking when you're marking work. So when you're marking work, please make sure you read the 3 sections: the content, the assessment criteria, and the essential information for assessment decisions. Because this has more expansion of what's in the criteria. So make sure you refer to all 3 of those when you're marking learner work. Here's some examples of marked work. You don't have to mark exactly like this. I like to have information I paste in and just change. I prefer to write that. Some people like to put in the work and then just block out sections. But I prefer to put it on another section and paste it in. But it's up to you. So make sure they know, are they yes or no the criteria. You can put here, resubmit. I tell the students, I'll put resubmit here, certain criteria. That's just my recommendation. Remember, if a student's authorised a resubmission, they can attempt any of the criteria, not just the ones you've highlighted. Now, this is what I like to push to students as the most important feedback in the general comments. So, I've got here, you did not back up your hypothesis. That's what they did wrong. So they know, when they work on D1, they need to back it up. It's quite subtle. I can't tell them to do it, but Pearson does allow me to tell them what they got wrong. Point the students to read the general comments, and if we can all use the general comments to highlight where students went wrong, then we can point them to that, rather than telling them what to do themselves. Right, to resubmit or not resubmit, that was a question. Right from lesson 1, please tell students to attempt all criteria they want to achieve on their first submission. What we don't want is students doing the pass on the first submission and then thinking they'll get a resubmission and to do the merit and or distinction. That's not how they should work, okay? Resubmissions should only be given if the work is handed on time or with an agreed extension, There's no plagiarism or AI misuse. Obviously there's degrees of that, okay? And so maybe talk to students if it happens. Maybe it's not really that serious, it's just a little bit, I'm not deliberate, but it can be deliberate sometimes. The learner can do it without any further guidance. So we need to remind students, resubmission, we can't tell you what to do. Just use that general guidance comments about what you did wrong. So, learners should be aware that resubmissions are not automatic. Yes, if they didn't pass, you can give a resubmission, as long as they've met these requirements. But if they're resubmission to get no distinction, the learners should have already made a good attempt to get it, not just started it, a good attempt. Obviously, if you're on the third assignment, or they got the merit distinction in the first two assignments, you maybe have a bit of leeway. If they just did an average attempt at the merit, you think, well, they've got the first two assignments merits, I will let them resubmit. But otherwise, Another thing we can do, again, this comes directly from the Senior Standards Verifier, not from the guidance we get on the documents I talked about. You can mark holistically. So, how close is a grade? So, if they've almost got P1, it's one very small bit, which may be mentioned in the assessment information. It's a very tiny bit. You could just say P1 is achieved, but you didn't do this very well. Give them some feedback. You don't have to use the word holistic, but a lot of us do use the word holistic in there, just to highlight to students that they got it, but didn't quite get it. Indicating a resubmission, okay? Please don't tell the students of a resubmission. Teach them to use Moodle to read the feedback. There's two places you should be using as an assessor. So, put a line through here. Electronically, I find it really hard to go back and put the date once you release feedback. So I put TB confirmed. But also you should put my name. Obviously, technically, you should actually talk to me about every student, but there isn't time to do that. You just put my name and the date when you think I looked at it. Right, resubmission date. So, if like me, you wrote TBC on the first assessment sheet rather than the date feedback's released, then I add to the resubmission sheet feedback released. Now, the reason is, once the students have feedback from the first submission, the clock's ticking. There's an absolute piercing deadline of 3 working weeks. They say 15 days, but what they really mean is 3 working weeks from when that date. After that date, you can't mark it. And so we give them a deadline. So that's like, looks like a week and a half. 5 o'clock. I like, and I think it's good practice, not to allow submissions up to midnight. If the student wants to work at midnight, they can do it the day before. But we should not be encouraging students to work late at night. So I always put 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock as my deadlines. Only release feedback for the first submission when you're ready to issue the resubmission. So don't just release feedback and then when you know you're going to see the students, or you can give them out the resubmission sheet so they can start working immediately, because the clock starts ticking from the release date. And as I mentioned, it's 15 working days, absolute max, when the first submission is released. This cannot be over holidays, so think carefully. Sometimes you have to keep hold of releasing feedback until you've gone past that half term or the Easter break or whatever. So think carefully. It is a bit of pain. Routinely here, we give 1 week for resubmissions. Because I teach 2 or 3 classes the same unit, I often give it a week from the last class I see. So I might release the feedback, send out an email to let them know, but it might be a week and 2 days because the third class I see, I just want to physically see them as well, and then a week from then. So that's the deadline for resubmission. And if you saw, there was a resubmission deadline on that resubmission sheet. Now, the reason we do this, if the resubmission is submitted late, you can still mark it, as long as it's within the 3 weeks. However, I should point out to students, they're not allowed to retake. So if they still don't get the pass in the resubmission, they fail the unit, unless they've got an authorised reason why the resubmission was late. After 3 weeks, 1 day, we're not allowed to mark them. That is the Pearson rules. Obviously, if they've got extenuating circumstances, we could look at that, maybe along with the tutor. But 3 weeks, 1 day, can't mark it. And that's why these dates, so just, I just want to show you what it looks like and turn it in. You don't have to create a separate file, turn it in file for the first submission, resubmission. And I'll often retake on the same one. So what the post date here is the date of feedback was released. And I don't you notice, I've broken the rule, but it's well over 2 weeks. That's probably because I had loads of assignments in. So I have to hold my hands up there. That's the date feedback's released. So 3 weeks from that date is when the resubmission has to be in. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Oh, but when you initially set this up, set like a year later. So students can't see feedback. And then when you're ready to release feedback, change the date to the date you want it to be available. You can change it in advance, and then let them know students from a certain date they can read the feedback. Retakes are only available to learners missing one or more passes. The first and resubmission are both handed on time or with an extension. And it's a completely new assignment that has to be written and internally verified. That only allows them to do the remaining passes. But please note, for BTEC first, retakes are not available. So if an assignment's not passed for BTEC first, make sure you mark the fallback criteria and hope they've achieved the fallback criteria. Okay? And then the students will need compensation to pass overall, whether on the exam or other units, whether they get merits or higher grades on the exam. Internal verification of marked learner work. This is very important. It's an important part of the quality process. Dates that need to be done need to be added onto this assessment planner. So, please note the internal verifier controls the sampling, not the assessor. So, grades can only be given to learners once internal verification has been successfully completed, not just completed, but successfully completed. There's not a recommended sample size, but I think a good working figure is at least 10% of a particular class for each assignment. So typically that would be 3 learners. Ideally, one at pass, one at merit, one distinction. It's not always possible. You may have to have somebody who missed a couple of passes, another one pass, good pass, and maybe a reasonable merit if there's no distinctions on the first submission. If the assessor's new, or there have been issues with the quality of their assignments, the internal verifier can select more. It's their decision. They control this. So ideally, you should give a mark sheet or the grade tracker or promoter grades, whatever, to the internal verifier. Ideally when you mark the whole lot, but obviously if time's tight, when you mark at least half of them, so they can select different learners. And then they will go and then access the learner work, but in most cases on Turnitin. So, what's internal verifier checking? Particularly most important, the accuracy of assessment decisions, but you can also give feedback on the quality of feedback to learner. Don't forget the feedback to the assessor. Is your feedback good? Please give good comments. If it's really good feedback, say so. Celebrate good practice. Now, if you disagree with an assessment decision, you need to set further action, smart targets, and discuss a date for completion of this. Feedback can only be released once the internal verifier is happy with any decisions or change decisions. Then feedback's released. So this could delay feedback to learners. So, using specification again, and just a reminder, internal verifier, just like the assessor, should make sure they refer to all 3 parts of the specification: the content, assessment criteria, and the essential information for assignment decision when checking the validity of assessment decisions. Target example, So say you disagree with the award of M1 for one of the learners. So the smart target will probably include points 1 and 2. Go back and remark the learner work, taking into account the feedback from the internal verifier. But also, remark all other learners who achieved M1 on the first submission. Double check they're correct. So get that done first. And particularly if you're doing that, what the assessor should then do is then give them an updated mark sheet to the internal verifier. Maybe give them the old one so you can see what's changed, and then they will go back and check not that learner. They might check 2 or 3 new learners. Plus some others. So it's double checking is a new grade for M1 given correctly or not given correctly as well. You can also check, by the way, if assessments are not given correctly. Because occasionally you may say, well, actually, M1 was achieved, by the way. You can actually look at it the other way around. Sometimes the assessment might be being too harsh. Then if all okay, you can then release feedback to the learners. And then don't forget to put the internal verification document on the S drive. Internal verification resubmissions. Okay, they can request to internally verify resubmissions if the assessor is very new and experienced, major issues. But normally we don't do it because we are a professional team. We're pretty confident in each other's judgments. So normally we don't verify, but it can be done. However, when you do the assessment planner, and again, my job is to double check that you've all done that correctly, that you still need to put a date for it, plan date, even if we're not going to use that date for internally verified resubmissions. Grades on Promonitor, as soon as possible, enter the grades carefully on Promonitor. Encourage learners to check their progress on Promonitor, so encourage them to do it. Ideally, don't tell the students to grade, just teach them how to check their grades, how to check their feedback. If we just tell them the whole time, they won't get their head around it. Right, we've now finished. I am going to check that you've all picked this up. So there's a BTEC Microsoft Forms quiz I've set up. You all need to complete it. I'll be checking that you've all completed it. And if anybody hasn't completed it, I will follow it up and just chase it up. But thank you for listening.